We like to believe that people are in control of what they reveal. We assume that if someone is careful enough, disciplined enough, socially intelligent enough, they can perfectly manage the impression they give. But the human psyche is not built for permanent performance. No one can consciously regulate every word, every tone shift, every subtle emphasis. Eventually, the mask cracks, and it cracks through language. Language is not just communication, it is revelation. A person may rehearse politeness, but their unconscious writes the subtext. The slip does not happen in grand confessions. It happens in patterns, repeated phrases, backhanded compliments, jokeys that consistently target the same insecurity, compliments that sound like comparisons, support that feels like supervision. The mask always slips in the small things. When someone secretly resents you, they may smile while speaking, but their word choice tightens. They say, "You've changed," but the tone implies accusation. They say, "Must be nice." When you share success, they say, "I'm surprised you pulled that off." When you achieve something meaningful, each sentence alone seems harmless. Together, they form a pattern. The unconscious does not speak in dramatic declarations. It leaks through repetition. A person who feels inferior around you might constantly minimize your effort. It's not that hard. Anyone could do that. You just got lucky. Notice how the language erodes accomplishment without openly attacking it. This is not coincidence. It is projection disguised as commentary. We reveal what we cannot contain. When someone dislikes you but wants to appear neutral, their sentences become subtly distancing. They stop saying "where" and start saying "you." They shift from collaboration to observation. Instead of "we did great," it becomes "you did your part." The unity dissolves linguistically before it dissolves socially. Pronouns betray alignment. Tone betrays emotion. Even timing betrays intention. Delayed congratulations, shortened responses. Enthusiasm that feels rehearsed. A person may think they are hiding resentment, but language carries emotional fingerprints. It exposes tension long before behavior becomes obvious. This is because language originates deeper than conscious intention. We choose words, but our emotional state chooses how we choose them. If admiration exists, it softens speech. If envy exists, it sharpens it. If insecurity exists, it sneaks comparison into everything. And here is what makes it powerful. People rarely notice their own leakage. They believe they are being realistic. They believe they are being honest. They believe they are simply telling it like it is. But their unconscious is solving a different problem, relieving internal discomfort. If your presence triggers someone's inadequacy, they will regulate themselves through language. They will subtly reduce you to restore balance within themselves. Don't get ahead of yourself. Let's see how long that lasts. Stay humble. Advice can be sincere, but when it consistently appears only after your progress, language reveals motive. The mask also slips through overcompensation. Excessive praise that feels exaggerated, forced enthusiasm, artificial laughter. When someone tries too hard to appear supportive, their speech loses rhythm. It becomes mechanical. The body and voice disconnect. Authenticity has flow. Performance has friction. Pay attention to friction. Silences can speak louder than sentences. When your success is met with topic changes, vague responses, or intellectual analysis instead of warmth, language is telling you what pride refuses to say openly. The psyche cannot maintain contradiction forever. If someone's internal truth conflicts with their external role, tension builds. Tension always finds a linguistic outlet: sarcasm, subtle digs, unsolicited criticism, strategic honesty. The mask slips not because people are evil, but because they are divided. They want to appear kind while feeling threatened. They want connection while carrying comparison. They want harmony while harboring judgment. And division eventually speaks. If you train yourself to observe patterns rather than isolated words, you begin to see clearly. You stop gaslighting your intuition. You stop excusing repeated dismissiveness as accidental. You stop ignoring the uneasy feeling that lingers after certain conversations. Language is never random. It carries the architecture of the inner world. When someone truly respects you, their speech stabilizes you. Even correction feels steady. Even disagreement feels grounded. There is no erosion underneath it. But when someone is masking disapproval, you feel subtle destabilization. You leave conversations slightly smaller, slightly doubtful, slightly defensive. That is not imagination. That is leakage. The mask always slips in language because the unconscious refuses to stay silent forever. Politeness is a social skill. Projection is a psychological reflex. And when the two collide, projection always wins. A person can smile while resenting you. They can compliment you while competing with you. They can speak gently while internally judging you. But no matter how refined their manners are, their unconscious will eventually override their performance. What they refuse to confront within themselves will quietly attach itself to you. Projection is not random, it is specific. It targets what triggers discomfort. When someone feels insecure about their intelligence, they subtly question yours. When they doubt their own discipline, they call you lazy. When they suppress their ambition, they label you too much. Their criticism often reveals more about their inner conflict than your actual behavior, and they will deliver it politely. That is what makes it dangerous. Because overt hostility is easy to recognize, but polite projection hides behind civility. It arrives wrapped in advice. It sounds reasonable. It feels almost constructive. Yet something about it feels misaligned. Projection does not accuse directly. It suggests. It implies. It frames. You're being a little dramatic. You think very highly of yourself. You always need attention. You're too sensitive. Notice the pattern. These phrases often emerge when you express confidence, emotion, or independence. The projector is not responding to your flaw, they are reacting to their own discomfort. When you embody something they have rejected within themselves, you become a mirror, and mirrors are confronting. Instead of asking, "Why does this bother me?" they unconsciously ask, "How can I correct you?" Politeness becomes the delivery system. They lower their voice, they soften their expression, they claim concern, but beneath the surface lies tension, because projection is not about truth. It is about relief. Relief from envy, relief from guilt, relief from comparison. If someone feels overshadowed, they may humble you. If they feel passive, they may call you aggressive. If they fear vulnerability, they may label you weak for expressing emotion. Projection flips internal discomfort outward. And here is the deeper psychological layer. Most people do not know they are doing it. The unconscious protects the ego. Admitting envy is painful. Admitting insecurity is destabilizing. So the psyche deflects. It preserves self-image by relocating flaws externally. You become the container for what they cannot hold. Politeness makes it socially acceptable. It keeps their self-image intact. They can still see themselves as kind, rational, balanced, while subtly undermining you. But projection has a distinct emotional signature. You feel misunderstood. You feel inaccurately described. You feel slightly blamed for something that does not fully belong to you. That confusion is not accidental. Projection distorts perception. Over time, if you internalize it, you begin questioning yourself. Maybe I am arrogant. Maybe I am dramatic. Maybe I am selfish. Slowly, you start adjusting your behavior to accommodate their discomfort. That is how projection gains power. It reshapes you to protect them. But awareness reverses this dynamic. When you recognize projection, you stop absorbing misplaced accusations. You start asking different questions. Is this truly about me? Or is this touching something unresolved in them? Does this criticism align with consistent feedback from grounded people in my life? Or does it only appear when I step into my strength? Patterns expose projection. If someone consistently criticizes traits that reflect their own suppressed desires, that is not coincidence. That is displacement. For example, a person who abandoned their dreams may resent your ambition. Instead of saying, I wish I had pursued mine, they say, you're unrealistic. The criticism protects them from regret. Projection speaks louder than politeness because energy cannot be disguised indefinitely. Tone carries charge. Micro expressions reveal irritation. Timing exposes insecurity. Politeness can smooth the surface, but it cannot silence the emotional undercurrent. You may hear kind words, but you feel resistance. You may receive advice, but you sense competition. You may notice encouragement, but detect hesitation. That gap between words and energy is where projection lives. And once you learn to observe that gap, something shifts inside you. You stop reacting defensively. You stop over-explaining. You stop shrinking to neutralize their discomfort. You understand that not every critique requires correction. Some critiques require distance. Because projection is not seeking dialogue, it is seeking discharge. It wants to offload internal tension. And when you refuse to carry what was never yours, the dynamic changes. The projector either becomes conscious or becomes uncomfortable. In either case, you regain psychological clarity. Politeness may shape sentences, but projection shapes intention. And intention always leaks through repetition, tone, and emotional residue left after interaction. You cannot control whether someone projects onto you, but you can control whether you accept the burden. Once you recognize projection, you stop confusing it with truth. You stop confusing it with insight. You stop confusing it with care, and you begin to see people not just by what they say, but by what they consistently transfer onto others. Not all disrespect is loud. Some of it never raises its voice, some of it smiles. Some of it says, relax, it's not that serious. And that is precisely why it is tolerated for so long. Passive disrespect hides behind subtlety. It rarely insults you directly. Instead, it minimizes you quietly. It interrupts your sentences. It forgets your achievements. It responds to your excitement with indifference. It makes jokes at your expense and then calls you sensitive for noticing. Because it is not aggressive, it is easy to doubt yourself. You tell yourself you are overthinking. You tell yourself they didn't mean it that way. You tell yourself you are being dramatic, but your body registers what your mind tries to excuse. A tightening in the chest, a slight hesitation before speaking again, a growing reluctance to share good news. Passive disrespect works slowly. It does not try to destroy your confidence in one moment. It erodes it in small, repeated interactions. A person who respects you listens when you speak. They do not scroll through their phone while you are opening up. They do not constantly redirect conversations back to themselves. They do not respond to your vulnerability with sarcasm. When someone repeatedly dismisses your ideas in meetings, but later presents similar ideas as their own, that is not oversight. When someone consistently forgets to invite you, acknowledge you, or credit you, that is not coincidence. Patterns reveal intention. Passive disrespect thrives in ambiguity. It lives in the space where you cannot quite prove it. They say, "I was just joking." They say, "You're too sensitive." They say, "That's not what I meant." And because there is no obvious hostility, you feel unreasonable for reacting. But respect is not only about what someone avoids doing, it is about what they consistently choose to do. Respect chooses attentiveness. Respect chooses acknowledgement. Respect chooses consideration. When those are repeatedly absent, something deeper is being communicated. Sometimes passive disrespect comes from envy. A person who feels threatened by you may subtly withhold validation. They may downplay your milestones. They may change the subject when you share progress. It is easier to shrink you quietly than to confront their own insecurity. Other times it comes from hierarchy. Someone may unconsciously believe they are above you. Their tone becomes instructional rather than collaborative. Their compliments carry comparison. Their humor contains hierarchy. And because they are not shouting, they convince themselves they are not harming you. But impact does not require volume. A dismissive glance can wound. A patronizing tone can belittle. A pattern of exclusion can isolate. The danger of passive disrespect is not just how it feels. It is how it conditions you. Over time, you may start speaking less, sharing less, celebrating less. You adjust your personality to avoid subtle rejection. You soften your confidence so it does not provoke subtle tension. You silence your instincts to preserve social harmony. That adaptation comes at a cost, because when you tolerate passive disrespect, you unconsciously send a message, not just to them, but to yourself, that your comfort is negotiable, and it is not. The psyche recognizes consistency. If someone occasionally missteps but generally shows care, you feel safe. But if someone consistently undermines you in quiet ways, your nervous system learns to anticipate dismissal. You begin entering interactions slightly guarded. That guard is data. It means something is misaligned. True respect feels steady. Even in disagreement, there is dignity. Even in critique, there is fairness. You do not leave conversations feeling subtly smaller. Passive disrespect, however, leaves residue, a faint irritation, a quiet disappointment, a sense of being unseen. And the more you ignore that residue, the more it accumulates. You do not need dramatic proof to validate your discomfort. Repetition is proof. Emotional aftertaste is proof. Your internal contraction is proof. Recognizing passive disrespect is not about becoming defensive. It is about becoming aware. It is about noticing patterns without immediately justifying them. It is about trusting the signals your body sends before your rational mind starts negotiating them away. Not every subtle slight is malicious, but consistent subtle dismissal is never accidental. And once you begin to see it clearly, you stop minimizing your experience, you stop over-accommodating, you stop laughing at jokes that quietly undermine you. Because respect is not measured by the absence of shouting. It is measured by the presence of consideration. Every human being carries a shadow, the hidden part of the psyche that contains rejected traits. Denied emotions and unacknowledged impulses, it is not evil, it is simply unconscious. But when someone refuses to confront their shadow, it does not disappear. It waits, it simmers, and eventually it speaks. At first, the shadow can hide behind charm. A person may appear supportive. They may say the right words. They may offer encouragement that sounds convincing. They may even play the role of ally convincingly enough to fool others and themselves. But warmth that is not authentic requires constant effort to maintain, and effort fatigues. You can feel the difference between natural warmth and performed warmth. Natural warmth is relaxed. It does not strain. It celebrates without calculation. It corrects without humiliation. It feels consistent across environments. Performed warmth is strategic. It fluctuates. It depends on who is watching. It feels enthusiastic in public and restrained in private. It praises loudly but critiques subtly. The shadow cannot sustain contradiction forever. If someone feels envy while pretending admiration, tension builds. If someone feels resentment while pretending support, emotional friction accumulates. The psyche is not built for permanent division. Sooner or later, something leaks. It may be a delayed congratulations, a tight smile, a sarcastic remark disguised as humor, a sudden withdrawal when you succeed. These moments are not random. They are the shadow surfacing. When someone suppresses jealousy, it does not dissolve. It transforms into subtle comparison. When they deny competitiveness, it becomes passive criticism. When they refuse to admit insecurity, it becomes minimizing language. The shadow seeks expression, and because it is denied consciously, it emerges indirectly. A person who secretly competes with you may frame everything as advice. They may guide you constantly. They may highlight your risks, your weaknesses, your potential failures, all while claiming concern. But underneath, there is relief in imagining you smaller. Warmth cannot coexist with hidden rivalry indefinitely. Eventually, consistency breaks. You might notice their energy shift when you share good news. Their tone changes. Their posture stiffens. Their excitement feels rehearsed. The body often reveals what the mouth tries to conceal. The shadow also appears in comparison. You did well, but that's impressive for someone like you. I would have handled it differently. The warmth is conditional. It always carries a subtle downgrade. When someone has integrated their shadow, when they have faced their envy, their pride, their insecurity, their support feels stable. They can celebrate you without measuring themselves. They can acknowledge your strengths without feeling diminished. But when the shadow is denied, your growth becomes threatening. Your success highlights their stagnation. Your courage exposes their fear. Your authenticity unsettles their performance. And instead of confronting those feelings internally, they attempt to regulate them externally. By cooling their warmth, it does not happen dramatically. It happens gradually. Conversations become shorter. Encouragement becomes less frequent. Criticism becomes more frequent. Distance replaces enthusiasm. The shadow grows tired of pretending. Another sign appears in moments of vulnerability. When you struggle, someone who truly supports you leans in with care, but someone whose warmth was performative may subtly brighten. Not overtly, but noticeably. Your setback relieves their comparison. Your doubt restores their balance. That reaction is the shadow finding comfort. It is uncomfortable to witness. But it is clarifying, because once the mask slips, patterns align, you realize the praise was inconsistent, the enthusiasm was selective, the encouragement depended on your position relative to them. The shadow cannot fake warmth forever, because warmth requires inner security. It requires wholeness. It requires the absence of hidden competition. Performance drains energy. Authenticity generates it. And over time, the strain of pretending outweighs the benefit of appearing supportive. You begin to sense it intuitively. The interactions feel heavier. The laughter feels thinner. The compliments feel rehearsed. You stop feeling emotionally nourished around them. That awareness is not paranoia, it is perception. When you stop ignoring subtle shifts, you see clearly who celebrates you fully and who tolerates you conditionally. The shadow always reveals itself, not because people are malicious, but because unacknowledged emotions demand expression. What is denied internally will eventually appear externally, whether through tone, timing, or withdrawal. And once you recognize the difference between real warmth and manufactured warmth, you no longer confuse politeness with loyalty. You no longer mistake proximity for support. You no longer overlook the small signals that tell a larger truth, because authenticity sustains itself. But the shadow, when ignored, eventually abandons the act. There is always a moment before realization, a quiet, almost imperceptible flicker inside you, when something feels off, before you have evidence, before you have proof, before you have language. Your intuition has already noticed, but your ego resists. Intuition does not shout, it does not argue, it does not present bullet points and structured conclusions. It whispers through sensation. A slight tightening in your stomach, a pause before responding, a subtle withdrawal of energy, an unexplainable hesitation. The ego, however, prefers certainty. It wants logic, it wants clarity, it wants to preserve the image you have constructed about your relationships, your decisions, your judgments. And when intuition threatens that image, the ego defends it. You sense someone's enthusiasm is forced, but your ego says you're overthinking. You feel a compliment carries tension, but your ego says, don't be paranoid. You notice inconsistency, but your ego says everyone has bad days. The ego protects comfort. Intuition protects truth, and truth is often uncomfortable. When someone secretly resents you, your body registers it before your mind does. Human beings evolved to detect subtle emotional shifts, micro expressions, changes in tone, altered rhythm in speech. These signals reach your nervous system faster than they reach conscious analysis. You feel the shift before you can articulate it, but admitting what you feel has consequences. If you accept that someone close to you harbors hidden hostility, you must reevaluate the relationship. If you acknowledge subtle disrespect, you must reconsider boundaries. If you recognize passive envy, you must confront emotional reality. The ego hesitates because acceptance disrupts stability. It is easier to doubt yourself than to redraw your social map. So you rationalize, you reinterpret. You minimize, you search for alternate explanations that preserve the existing structure. You tell yourself stories that soften the tension. Meanwhile, your intuition remains steady. It does not escalate, it does not dramatize, it simply persists. You feel drained after certain conversations. You feel slightly diminished after sharing good news. You feel cautious where you once felt open. These are not random emotional fluctuations. They are data. Intuition processes patterns faster than conscious thought. It notices repetition, delayed responses, subtle comparisons, dismissive humor, and forms impressions beneath awareness. By the time your ego catches up, your body has already concluded something. This internal conflict creates anxiety. Part of you knows. Part of you resists knowing. The ego fears embarrassment. It fears being wrong. It fears appearing sensitive. It fears losing connection. So it delays acceptance. It waits for undeniable proof. A dramatic moment, a clear betrayal, an obvious statement. But intuition does not wait for explosions. It recognizes smoke. There is also pride involved. Admitting your intuition was correct means admitting you ignored it. That recognition can wound the self-image of being perceptive, rational, composed. The ego would rather preserve identity than revise it. Yet ignoring intuition has consequences. When you override it repeatedly, you disconnect from internal guidance. You start outsourcing validation. You rely more heavily on external reassurance than internal alignment. You become easier to manipulate because you doubt your own perception. Reconnecting with intuition requires courage. It requires tolerating uncertainty without immediate justification. It requires observing patterns without rushing to defend them away. Intuition is not accusation. It is awareness. It does not tell you to attack. It tells you to observe. When you stop arguing with your own perception, clarity increases. You become less reactive because you are less confused. You do not need dramatic confrontations. You adjust subtly. You create distance where energy feels heavy. You invest where warmth feels genuine. The ego seeks comfort in narratives. Intuition seeks alignment with reality. And often, reality appears first as discomfort. If you learn to sit with that discomfort, instead of silencing it, something powerful happens. You begin to trust your internal compass. You notice emotional shifts without immediately invalidating them. You respect your own perception, because long before your mind constructs explanations, your nervous system has already mapped the emotional terrain around you. Your intuition notices the fracture in tone. It notices the concealed comparison. It notices the subtle withdrawal. It notices the energy behind the words.